Welcome back to another video on this channel. Today we're going to be talking about the amazing digital circus. As you might be aware, there is a leak that has happened. It was the finale, right? So this show has gone on for about 8 episodes, I believe, and then the finale was like a kind of like a movie that was going to be in theaters. And I think it's still planned to be in theaters, but there has been a bump in the road with this series. And even since the beginning, I think that the amazing digital circus has been facing a bunch of issues and stuff like that. And we see the same thing with other productions. You have a lot of these indie projects kind of facing different issues. One of the things that they obviously struggle with is that they aren't really prepared for them to be doing business, right? Because like a lot of the indie productions, they mostly are people that are artistic and creative types. And so when they start doing things like having to manage a brand or IP, they aren't ready to face, the responsibilities that come with that. And so I think like what ends up happening is a lot of these people are unprepared whenever a leak happens or whenever their work gets published online for everyone to see. And then the entire, finale of the show gets spoiled, right? I would argue that a lot of it is probably due to incompetence, right? And as much as people wouldn't like to say, but I think it is definitely on the showrunner if something ends up getting leaked. So while it is sad that things do get leaked and that, because it's not necessarily the showrunner's fault that someone chooses to target them, but if they're leaving themselves open for that stuff to happen, then obviously it's going to happen.
Could it be actual people working on it that leak it?
Yeah, that can happen too, but that's very rare, and you would want to trust everybody involved, right?
Can use AI, right?
Well, I mean, you can use AI to target security. Like, the problem with AI now is that, and this might actually be a reason why we're seeing more of these leaks, is because AI can essentially, it can find vulnerabilities in systems, and then it can exploit those vulnerabilities, and then people can use that to gain access. And so I don't think that's what's happening in this case, but I think it's just that when the movie was being brought to theaters, because it was specifically the Brazilian version of the movie, when it was being dubbed for the Brazilian version of the movie apparently ended up getting leaked. And that's why I think that you should distribute the movies later to other countries later. So I think you should release it first in the country that it's made in, right? And this is also seen with anime, right? Because with anime, you have the people who distribute the anime will first release it into Japan, because that's where the anime is made, and then it gets released to other countries later on, right? So your first priority should be releasing it in America and then release it to other countries. Now, back then, what we used to have is that we had TV, right?
Yeah.
And people would go and they would pitch a show, and then that would be made for TV and that would air on TV. However, because streaming services are becoming more popular and because online content is being treated more seriously than it was before, I think that has the negative effect that now indie stuff is starting to suffer, because it's almost kind of a weird thing where it's indie used to be something that was kind of its own thing, but now it's starting to become part of the mainstream, which I think indie should be kept separate from the mainstream. Now, because things are becoming digitized now and we don't have film anymore, then that makes things more open for, being shown earlier than what is anticipated, and even in a form which it was not meant to be.
I mean, I kind of feel like movie theaters are kind of dying out anyway, so maybe it won't have a huge effect.
I don't think that they're dying out. It's just that I think a lot of them are going out of business. Going to the cinema, I think that will always be a thing. You can make a pilot, and that could be fine, but not every story is meant to be told. Honestly, I think that the digital circus, I think that it has some good qualities to it. I don't think it's a very creative show. Now, I know people might disagree with that and think well, what do you mean? I think that the show, while it does have some, interesting ideas and themes, I don't think it's that creative of a show. I'm not saying the digital circus is a bad show. I think, to me, it should have been more of a movie. In my opinion, I still think that. I know people might disagree with that and say, but we know from the past that Gooseworx has only created, up to this point, before the digital circus, has only created like short films. Past what we're seeing on screen, it feels like it's very hollow. Like there isn't really much outside of what we see the characters doing on screen.
I mean, maybe just the creator didn't flesh the world out enough, you know?
Well, that's why like I value the world really deeply, and I think that the part of this show is that the world is in complete mystery. I'm not saying that the characters are bad, but like also a lot of the characters don't feel like they have a lot of depth, in my opinion. I'm just gonna be honest. The only character that I could say that has any like amount of depth that I think that I like out of the cast is Jax, because he feels like he's a real character, right? Because a lot of the other characters feel like characters. Like they literally feel like two-dimensional characters.
I think because like everything is on streaming now, like the thing with, you know, television is that it has to be for a general audience. And so I think people had to be more clever about how they portrayed things and stuff, and like, you know,
yeah, and that's the thing about like indie. What I'm trying to say is like,
because they can just like be super edgy and do whatever they want, you know?
Yeah, and also like with you know, television, I think that there is a higher standard, right? Standard placed onto them. So something serviceable can be treated as something, oh, it's so great, it's so good. And people applaud that. People applaud things that are just serviceable. I think also like a thing about like indie stuff too, which I think kind of defeats the purpose of indie, is a lot of this indie stuff ends up looking very polished, like almost like how television is, right? It's like imitating television, right? Ends up looking very polished, very like, and to me that's like, that's kind of not what indie is, right? It's not meant to be super polished, not meant.
And I think the question is that I have is like, are anybody gonna remember these shows like 20 years from now? Like there's something about the fact that people still love SpongeBob to this day. Well, technically they're making this one.
To me it feels like they want to do it because of money. I'm just gonna say it, because like, why can't you make movies? That seems a bit weird to me. Why do you have to make these kind of mini series? But I think that like, because you can just create indie projects out of nothing, and it's very easy to create things now more than it is ever for like a normal person to, that kind of makes it a bit more like, again, anything indie is treated as a good, which I think that is the problem, is that anything now that's an independent project is now seen as suddenly makes it better just because it has that label on it, when in reality it's no different than any other thing that's. And also like, here's the thing, the reason why I don't like a lot of indie stuff is because a lot of indie stuff is functionally entertainment, and that's its only purpose.
It's not like art.
Yeah, it's not like I don't mind things having an entertainment value. That's not my problem.
Do you consider Digital Circus then?
The Digital Circus tries to be a little bit more, but to me, I think that it just doesn't, like, from what I've seen of it, I don't think it executes on its concept. Like, if I were to break it down and talk about it, I'm not even sure what it's about. It seems very hard to glean what the writers were intending when they made this show, like what Gooseworx was intending when writing it. It just doesn't seem like it's been well thought out, at least to me. But like, it just seems like they keep on adding more details, and it's very aimless in my opinion. Like, to me, like, just saying that things are supposed to be for mystery and left open to interpretation, that's just bad writing, in my opinion. To be open for theories and speculation, and open. A similar problem I have with FNAF is that modern FNAF is basically, let's just leave the door open for theories and speculation, and let's not actually have anything that we want to say with our narrative. So that's what I have a problem with. It kind of has this sort of FNAFism. But like, here's the thing, also a big problem I have with stories is that they're very character focused. I don't like that. I think that is a symptom of poor writing, because then you get kind of obsessed with just like, okay, only the characters matter. But then it's like, well, if only the character matter, then why do we even care about these characters in the first place if there is no attention given to the outside world? Like, there's no point in caring about characters if they are not grounded to the world that they're in.